The email came 9:42 a.m. Cancellation confirmed. Lakeview Manor Quinn Wilder engagement party. Ivy Quinn read the subject line twice, her pulse pounding. This had to be a mistake. She had spent months planning, choosing every detail carefully. But when she called her mother, the answer was devastatingly simple. Ivy, that venue wasn't appropriate. A wedding isn't just about love, it's about the right kind of match. Then came the final betrayal. The same venue, her venue, had been booked for her sister's birthday instead. They weren't just cancelling a party. They were cancelling him. But if her family thought she would back down, they were wrong. This fight had just begun. The email came 9:42 a.m. Cancellation confirmed. Lakeview Manor Quinn Wilder engagement party. Ivy Quinn sat frozen at her kitchen table, the words blurring before her eyes. Her heart pounded as she reread the subject line, willing it to change. This had to be a mistake. She had spent months planning this event, meticulously choosing every detail, the floral arrangements, the lighting, the menu. Lakeview Manor was supposed to be the perfect place to celebrate her engagement to Knox. A night where their two worlds would finally come together. She clicked on the email, fingers trembling. Dear Ms. Quinn, per request, we have processed the cancellation of your event on June 14th at Lakeview Manor. Let us know if you require any further assistance. Wishing you all the best. Ivy's stomach twisted. Per request. Whose request? A sharp knock on the counter made her flinch. Knox stood in front of her, his brows furrowed in concern. Everything okay? He asked, setting his coffee down. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. How could she tell him? How could she possibly explain that her family, the people who were supposed to love and support her, had just erased their engagement party like it was an inconvenience? I just need to make a quick call. She grabbed her phone and stepped onto the balcony, pressing the call button with shaking hands. The phone barely rang twice, before her mother answered. Ivy, sweetheart, good morning. Margaret Quinn's voice was light, pleasant, like nothing had happened. Ivy didn't bother with pleasantries. Did you cancel my engagement party? A pause. Then, her mother sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. Darling, that venue wasn't appropriate. You'll understand someday that these things matter. Appropriate? Ivy repeated, her voice rising. You didn't think to ask me first. We were going to tell you, Margaret said smoothly. Besides, a wedding isn't just about love, it's about the right kind of match. Ivy felt the ground shift beneath her. There it was. The truth beneath the excuse. Her throat tightened. This isn't about the venue, is it? She said, her voice dangerously low. Silence. Then, the final blow. Oh, before I forget, Lottie's birthday invitations just went out. We've booked Lakeview Manor for the party. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. Ivy felt like she'd been slapped. The same venue. Her venue. Her mother's voice remained maddeningly calm. We'll see you there, won't we? Ivy's grip on the phone tightened, so hard her knuckles turned white. They weren't just cancelling a party. They were cancelling him. Her pulse roared in her ears as she whispered, You never intended to accept Knox, did you? Margaret's voice softened, as if she were explaining something obvious. Sweetheart, you and Knox come from different worlds. That kind of gap. It's not something love alone can fix. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped Ivy's lips. No, what you mean is, he's not rich enough. Ivy, don't be dramatic. But Ivy had already hung up. She stood there for a long moment, staring blankly at the city skyline. Then, slowly, she turned and walked back inside. Knox looked up, concern etched into every line of his face. "Annie." She met his gaze, her voice steady but laced with something colder. "Stronger." "They cancelled it." His brows knitted. "What? Who?" "My parents." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "And then they booked the same venue for Lottie's birthday." Knox stiffened. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. "Annie, I don't want this to come between you and your family." But it already had. She stepped closer, her voice fierce. "If they think they can erase us that easily." Her jaw clenched. "They have no idea what's coming." The decision was made. Ivy Quinn wasn't going to let her family dictate her life. If they wouldn't celebrate her engagement, she would celebrate it herself, on her own terms, with the people who truly mattered. "I don't need a ballroom, a string quartet, or a guest list filled with people who only care about last names," she had told Knox. "I just want a night that's about us." And so, Willow Grove Brewery became their venue. It was nothing like the grandeur of Lakeview Manor, no chandeliers, no crystal glasses, no hushed conversations about stock portfolios. Just warm wooden tables, fairy lights strung across the patio, and the laughter of friends who actually cared. As Ivy stood in the middle of the cozy, intimate space, watching Knox talk animatedly with his best friend, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. But it didn't last. Because across town, at the Lakeview Manor, her family was throwing Lottie's birthday party, the event that had replaced her own. And the longer she stood there, sipping champagne and pretending she didn't care, the more something inside her burned. She could let it go. She could ignore it. Or she could face it head on. Her fingers tightened around her glass. "We're going." Knox turned to her, startled. "Going where?" She met his eyes, her voice unwavering. "To the party." The moment Ivy and Knox stepped into Lakeview Manor, the atmosphere shifted. The grand hall was everything her parents loved, polished, elegant, filled with Chicago's most powerful families. A towering champagne fountain gleamed under the golden chandeliers. Waiters in crisp, white jackets glided between the guests, offering hors d'oeuvres worth more than some people's monthly rent. And there, in the center of it all, was Lottie, radiant in an ivory gown, laughing as she accepted another gift. The room fell into a hushed murmur as people noticed Ivy. She saw it in their eyes. The silent calculations. The judgment. The unspoken question, why is she here? And then, there were her parents. Margaret and Bill Quinn stood near the head of the room, their expressions unreadable. Ivy lifted her chin. Before anyone could speak, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Knox?" A tall, silver-haired man stepped forward from the crowd. Jonathan Whitmore, CEO of Vertex Innovations. One of the most influential figures in the tech industry. Ivy felt Knox stiffen beside her. "I was hoping to see you tonight," Jonathan said, extending a hand. "Congratulations, by the way. I hear the acquisition is nearly final." Silence. The words hit like a thunderclap. Acquisition. Nearly final. Ivy turned to Knox, but he was still staring at Whitmore, his expression carefully neutral. "You're acquiring his company?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. Before Knox could answer, her father smiled. That slow, knowing smile that sent ice through her veins. "Yes," Bill Quinn said smoothly, stepping forward. "Vertex Innovations is making an offer, $200 million, if I recall correctly." $200 million. The crowd stirred. The murmur of conversation shifted. The way people looked at Knox changed. And so did her parents' expressions. They were no longer cold, indifferent. no longer treating him like an outsider. Now, they were interested. Margaret Quinn took a step closer, her voice warm, almost welcoming. "Knox, dear, why don't you and Ivy stay for the rest of the party?" Ivy laughed. A short, sharp sound that cut through the air. She turned to her mother, eyes blazing. "Oh, now he's good enough." Her mother didn't flinch. Neither did her father. That was the worst part. Because it meant this was never about Knox as a person. It was about his value. His worth. And to them, that worth had only been proven when a number with 8 zeros was attached to his name. Knox gently touched her arm, voice low. "Annie, let's go." She didn't need to be told twice. Without another word, they turned and walked out of Lakeview Manor, leaving behind the family that would never see Knox for what he truly was. Not a business opportunity. Not an investment. But the man she loved. And for them, that would never be enough. The cool night air hit Ivy like a slap, as she and Knox stepped outside Lakeview Manor. Her heels clicked against the stone driveway, each step fueled by the fire still burning in her chest. "They don't care about you," she muttered, voice tight with anger. They never did. Until they saw a dollar sign. Knox let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Annie, let's just go." "Ivy." A deep voice cut through the night, stopping them both in their tracks. Jonathan Whitmore. The CEO stood under the golden glow of the entrance lights, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Leaving so soon?" he asked casually, then turned to Knox. "I would have thought you'd want to celebrate." Ivy's jaw clenched. "Celebrate what, exactly?" Whitmore raised a brow. "Your parents. They did quite a bit to make this deal happen." The words made Ivy still. A strange, uneasy weight settled in her stomach. "What are you talking about?" Knox asked, narrowing his eyes. Whitmore chuckled. "You really don't know, do you?" Ivy's pulse quickened. "Know what?" Whitmore shifted his gaze to her. "Your mother. Margaret. She was the one who wrote to us first, personally introduced Knox's work to some of the biggest investment firms in the city." The world tilted. "No," Ivy said, shaking her head. "That's not possible." Her mother had been the one to cancel their engagement party. Had been the one to erase Knox from their future. Why would she? "Your father, too," Whitmore continued. "Bill Quinn made sure the right people were paying attention to Knox's company before we even considered the acquisition." Knox stood frozen beside her, hands clenched into fists. "They helped me." His voice was low, disbelieving. "They didn't just help," Whitmore said, amused. "They made damn sure your technology was seen by the right people. Without them, Knox, you might still be fighting to get through the door." Ivy turned toward Knox, searching his face, but he was still staring at Whitmore, as if trying to process the weight of those words. "Why?" she whispered. A new voice answered. "Because we wanted you to choose for yourself." Ivy spun around. Margaret Quinn stood at the entrance, elegant as ever in her ivory evening gown, her expression softer now. Behind her, Bill Quinn watched quietly, hands folded in front of him. "You wanted to control me," Ivy shot back, her voice sharp. Margaret shook her head. "No, darling. We wanted to protect you." Ivy's breath hitched. "By sabotaging my engagement party. By making sure that if you married him," Margaret said gently, "you would never regret it." Silence. Margaret took a slow step forward. "I know what you're thinking. That we didn't accept Knox. That we didn't think he was good enough." She exhaled. "But the truth is, we just needed to be sure he could stand beside you, not as a struggle, not as a sacrifice, but as an equal. Ivy's throat tightened. And you didn't trust me to figure that out myself. Margaret's gaze softened. I trust you with everything, Ivy. She hesitated. But I also know what it's like to love someone so much that you'd give up anything for them. And I didn't want you to give up yourself. The weight of her mother's words settled deep in her chest. She turned to her father, who had remained silent through it all. Dad, she asked, her voice quieter now. Bill Quinn exhaled, his face unreadable. You're my daughter. I will always do whatever it takes to make sure you're safe. Her vision blurred. This wasn't control. This wasn't manipulation. It was love, the kind of love that didn't always look like kindness. The kind that sometimes looked like betrayal. Her mother stepped forward, reaching out. We never wanted to stand in your way, sweetheart. We just wanted to be sure that when you walked forward, you did it with no regrets. Ivy's heart twisted. For weeks, she had been so sure of their cruelty, their selfishness. She had painted them as villains in her mind. And yet, her mother had fought for Knox behind the scenes. Her father had pulled strings to make sure he had a real shot. Not because they wanted to stop them, but because they wanted them to survive. Her hands trembled at her sides. Margaret smiled softly. It was never about whether we accepted Knox, darling. She paused. It was about whether the world would. And suddenly, Ivy wasn't sure what to feel anymore. The text came at 7:14 a.m. Your wedding with Knox is ready. Exactly where you want it, exactly how you want it. Ivy sat up so fast she nearly knocked her phone off the nightstand. For a long moment, she just stared at the message, heart pounding. Knox stirred beside her, groggily rubbing his eyes. What's wrong? She turned the screen toward him. He read it once, then again, his brows furrowing. Wait. What? Ivy didn't answer. She was already out of bed, grabbing the nearest pair of jeans and a sweater, her mind racing. Her parents had spent weeks trying to control her life. Trying to dictate who she should marry, when and how. And now, they had planned a wedding for her. She wasn't sure whether to be furious or... No. She needed to see it first. The moment they arrived, Ivy felt her breath catch. The brewery, their brewery, had been transformed. Strings of warm fairy lights crisscrossed above the open-air patio, casting a golden glow over the rustic wooden tables and wildflower centerpieces. Candles flickered gently in glass lanterns, and in the distance, soft acoustic music played. It was exactly what she had wanted. No grand ballroom. No stiff, formal elegance. Just warmth. Simplicity. Love. And then she saw them. Her parents. Margaret and Bill Quinn stood near the entrance, waiting. But they weren't alone. Their friends were here. Her friends. Knox's friends. The people who had been at their engagement party. The people who had stood by them. All of them, here. Waiting for her. Ivy turned to Knox, still trying to process what she was seeing. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. And then, her father stepped forward. Ivy. Knox. His voice was steady, but there was something uncharacteristically soft in his tone. Ivy swallowed. What is this? Her mother smiled gently. Your wedding. Silence stretched between them. Ivy shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. You spent weeks trying to stop us. Why would you do this now? Bill Quinn exhaled. For the first time in her life, he looked uncertain. Then, he lifted a glass of champagne and spoke. Because we were wrong. The words stunned her into stillness. Her father looked around the room, then back at her. "We thought we were protecting you. We thought we knew what was best. But last night, when you walked away, I realized something." He paused. "We weren't protecting you. We were protecting ourselves, from change, from the idea that we might not have all the answers." A deep breath. "But you do." Ivy felt her throat tighten. "Today," Bill continued, raising his glass higher, "we don't just celebrate Ivy and Knox. We celebrate ourselves, because for the first time, we have learned how to put love above everything else." The room was silent. And then, applause. Loud. Genuine. Ivy felt something break inside her. For weeks, she had fought. Had braced herself for war. Had convinced herself that her family would never understand. But now, she wiped at her eyes, shaking her head as a quiet, watery laugh escaped. She turned to Knox, her heart aching with something too big to name. He took her hand, squeezing gently. "Are we really doing this?" he whispered. Ivy looked around. At the people who loved them. At the family who had finally seen them. She turned back to him. "Yes." And just like that, they got married. Not in a grand hall. Not under the pressure of society's expectations. But here. With them. And for the first time in her life, Ivy Quinn felt truly, completely free. The wedding had been perfect. Ivy had never imagined that a night filled with so much uncertainty could end with so much love. And yet, as she looked around the warmly lit reception hall of Willow Grove Brewery, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. A sense of belonging. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Conversations flowed between people who, only months ago, might have never been in the same room together. But of course, not everyone was happy. Because in the corner of the room, seated at a table adorned with crisp white linens and untouched champagne flutes, were a few old money elites, guests from her parents' social circle, the ones who still looked at Knox like he was an outsider. And then, one of them spoke. "I still don't understand," a deep, condescending voice mused, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "How a man who used to drive a second-hand car managed to marry into the Quinn family." The words were coated in silk and venom. A cruel smile tugged at the corner of the man's lips as he swirled the champagne in his glass. Ivy felt her stomach tighten. She immediately turned toward Knox, ready to fight, ready to remind this arrogant bastard that her husband was a self-made genius. But before she could say a word, another voice cut through the air. "Bill Quinn. If you still measure a man by the car he drives," he said coolly, setting down his drink, "then perhaps it is you who does not deserve to sit at this table." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. The entire room stilled. The man who had spoken, the smug aristocrat, who had probably never worked for anything a day in his life, blinked, caught completely off guard. Bill leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp as steel. Knox Wilder built his success from the ground up. Without a family fortune. Without connections. Without anything except his own brilliance and hard work. His voice was steady, deliberate. "And if you believe that kind of man is beneath you, then I can assure you, you are not worthy of sitting here." The silence deepened. Ivy's heart pounded. Because this was her father, the man who once dismissed Knox, the man who had once doubted everything about their relationship, defending him. Not out of obligation, but out of pride. Knox, too, was frozen. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, his eyes fixed on Bill, as if trying to comprehend the weight of what had just happened. The man who had insulted him let out a nervous chuckle, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Bill, I didn't mean any Yes, you did. Bill's voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the warning in his tone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd rather not waste any more of my time with men who think wealth is the only measure of worth. With that, Bill Quinn turned away, completely dismissing the man in front of the entire room. A slow wave of murmurs rippled through the guests. And then, someone clapped. It was Margaret. Then Lottie. Then, one by one, others joined in. A thunderous round of applause filled the air, drowning out whatever bitterness still remained in the room. And at the center of it all, Knox stood in stunned silence. Ivy reached for his hand, squeezing gently. His fingers curled around hers, tight, warm. And then, in a voice so quiet only she could hear, he whispered, "They've really accepted me, haven't they?" Ivy felt her eyes sting. She turned to him, her heart so full it hurt. "Yes, Knox." She smiled, squeezing his hand even tighter. "They really have." And for the first time, Knox Wilder didn't have to fight for his place at the table. Because he had already won. The night was winding down. The last of the champagne had been poured, the music had softened into something slow and warm, and laughter filled the air. Ivy stood on the edge of the dance floor, Knox's hand resting lightly on her waist. From where they stood, she could see something that, just weeks ago, would have seemed impossible. Her parents. Talking. Smiling. Not with their usual crowd of high society elites, but with Knox's friends, the people who had been with him since the beginning. Margaret Quinn, ever the picture of grace, was deep in conversation with Daniel Carter, Knox's college roommate and best friend, who still wore sneakers with his suit and had once hacked into their university's grading system for fun. And Bill Quinn. He was standing with Maria and Lewis Wilder, Knox's parents. The same man who once saw Knox as nothing but an outsider was now shaking hands with his father, nodding at something the older man had said. There was no tension. No resistance. Just acceptance. Ivy exhaled, leaning into Knox. "I never thought I'd see this," she murmured. Knox glanced over, his thumb tracing small circles against her hip. "See what?" She nodded toward their families. Them. Together. No fights. No expectations. Just being. Knox was quiet for a moment. Then, with a small smile, he pulled her closer. "You thought we'd always have to fight to be accepted, didn't you?" Ivy looked up at him, her chest tightening. "I did," she admitted softly. For so long, she had believed that love, their love, would always be a battle. That her parents would never change. That they would always see Knox as someone who had to prove himself. But maybe they just needed time. Her fingers curled around his. "Turns out," she whispered, "all they really needed was to understand that love is the only thing that actually matters." Knox's eyes softened. He lifted her hand, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles before murmuring, "They finally see what I've always known." Ivy tilted her head. "And what's that?" His smile was slow, warm, certain. "That I was always going to be yours." Her breath hitched. And just like that, the war was over. The fight was won. And for the first time, Ivy Quinn and Knox Wilder weren't just two people in love. They were family. Love is not just a bond between two people. It is a journey, one that challenges, reshapes, and redefines the very people who embark on it. For Ivy and Knox, love was never the problem. It was the world around them. The expectations. The doubts. The silent battles between tradition and change, between old ways and new dreams. But love, true love, is relentless. It does not demand to be understood immediately. It does not seek permission. Instead, it teaches. It proves. It shows, rather than tells. Margaret and Bill Quinn never hated Knox. They never wanted to destroy their daughter's happiness. They simply didn't know how to love the way she needed them to. But love, when given time, has the power to change even the most stubborn hearts. It can turn fear into understanding, doubt into acceptance, resistance into pride. And so, this was never just a love story about a woman and a man. It was a story about family. About breaking cycles. About learning that sometimes, when people fight us, it's not because they don't love us. It's because they don't yet know how to. And in the end, love didn't just win. It transformed. It healed. It brought them home. The real happily ever after.